Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Way T Lightheart from biOptimizers with my good buddy, Matt Gallant. And of course, if you notice my voice inflection, it's because we've got a legend here today from Bad Guy Incorporated, Chael Sonnen. And Chael Sonnen is an American submission grappling promoter, mixed martial arts analyst, and a retired mixed martial artist. He competed in the UFC, where he became a top contender in both the lightweight and middleweight divisions. He is often considered one of the best mixed martial artists to have never won a UFC championship. In 2014, he became an ESPN MMA analyst. And in 2016, he founded Submission Underground, his own wrestling promotion. He is further widely regarded as one of the greatest trash talkers in MMA history, and he's taken time out of his busy schedule to join us today. Chael, welcome to the show.
That was a very nice greeting. I got to tell you, you really know how to pick a guy up. Thank you. What's happening, fellas?
Great to see you, man. I'm a huge fan. Again, I've been watching UFC since UFC 1. Used to train a lot of MMA, and in my opinion, you are the absolute best, not just trash talker and one of the greatest self-promoters, but I think you're absolutely the number one guy to decode self-promotion and marketing. I'm a huge fan of your YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed, check out Chael. I'm just curious, where did you start picking up the self-promotional aspect? What was your inspirations?
Okay, I got to tell you, I've never seen, and thank you for saying that, by the way. I need that was very beautiful. But I've never seen a football game in my whole life. I know what it is. I've never seen an entire game. I bought tickets to a semi-pro hockey team that's here in Portland. I even went to a game. I never saw an entire game. My uncle won 2 NBA championships and an Olympic gold medal. I've never seen a basketball game. But I could tell you every political debate to ever happen, every presidential debate, senatorial, governor in different states. I just always enjoyed that. I enjoyed the gamesmanship. I enjoyed the fight with no punches being thrown. I enjoyed the body language. I enjoyed the inflection. I enjoyed the mannerisms. And it was just something that I was always a fan of. So when you ask me my inspiration, a lot of people think it came from WWE. I always take that, but I'm not that big of a wrestling fan. I grew up on Hulk Hogan, a little bit of Stone Cold, but it was one of those things where that's where I learned to talk like the guys that were on the debate stage, the guys and the women that were battling out without ever getting within arm's reach of one another. And I just liked that. And it was the people that I got drawn to, even in pro wrestling or in fighting. I grew up always hearing about how great Muhammad Ali was. Muhammad Ali had his last fight the year that I was born. So I didn't get to live through that, but I heard about it. My father would tell me about it. And it was always the emotion that Ali could bring out in people. It wasn't what he said. It was how it made people feel. You've heard that expression before, but I'm here that it was very true. And there was some golfer that goes back, and John McEnroe, if you remember him in tennis, but he could do some of that same stuff. He could entertain you. He could bring a commodity aside from the performance. He could bring an entertainment value. I just liked it. So I did my best to develop a persona and try to copy it.
So you did craft consciously a persona. And again, it's kind of the bad guy, even though I hear from a lot of people that know you, you're one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. So is that a switch? My friend Todd Herman wrote a book called The Alter Ego Effect. Is that something you can just switch on command and just go right into that alter ego?
It was. I had a lot of fun with it, the bad guy thing. And where that came from was just everybody was trying to be liked, myself included. You wanted to be the handsomest guy or the most liked or the most skilled, but it was always on that end of the spectrum. And I started to realize every movie has a bad guy. They got to write it in, but somebody has to play that part. Every book, every play, every story has a bad guy. And I realized there were none in MMA. And I said, man, I could be the number one. I could be the number one most hated, the number one heel, if you will, in the entire sport if I just raise my hand, because nobody else is applying for the job. I mean, that end of the pool is wide open. So when I jumped in and I started trying to irritate people, I started trying to get the crowd to boo. It was so easy. They were looking for somebody to boo. They were looking to get that negative energy out. They just didn't have anybody until I came along. So, and then, to be a heel, to be the bad guy, I'm using that term, that's a pro wrestling vernacular, heel, but to be the heel, you got to be able to take it when the cameras are off. You got to stick to that character so people see you around town and they look the other way. Whereas, you know, you used to want them to run up and say hi, or maybe pat you on the back and say, hey, good luck this weekend. So you really got to live that, which is tough for most people, but I enjoyed it. The boos are a heel's cheer. When I would walk into arena and people were throwing their soda on me, they were throwing their nacho. I know what a nacho and a soda cost at the MGM Grand. They were choosing to throw it on me. And I mean, I was so empowered by it. I did enjoy that time of my life. I really enjoyed traveling the world and being the one they showed up to hate.
Well, since your time too, I think the whole UFC self-promotional approach, you know, from Conor to Colby to whoever, has shifted to the heel. Do you feel at this point that there's an opportunity for a Hulk Hogan-esque type character or alter ego to do well in UFC and self-promotion? Because we've never really seen that, in my opinion.
I think it's a great point. You know, you talk about the great promoters, the Dana Whites or the Scott or the Bob Arams and Don Kings of the world, but the world's best promoter is Vince McMahon. He is the only one who has taken something that he has admitted is fake, sold out an arena, sold a t-shirt to the crowd, and had people leave in tears because their character didn't win. Vince McMahon swears he could sell out Madison Square Garden to watch a wrestler take on a mop if he had time to promote it correctly. And I only bring that to you because if you're going to listen to somebody in promotion, you can't deny Vince. And one thing that Vince has always said over time is that every character needs tweaked, whether it's a full makeover or it's just a small addition every 12 months. After 12 to 14 months, it gets a little bit stale and you have to tweak it. I've seen him take guys like Chris Jericho, take the same guy, but put a scarf on, just by example, or take the same guy, but he grows a beard, you know, something like that, all the way to all new characters with all new names, but a little tweaking every 12 to 14 months. And yes, I do think there's room for somebody to do a face turn and go more of a Hulk Hogan route. Yes.
Who do you feel is the best trash talker in the UFC right now?
Well, I would think I would have to give that to McGregor. I think he's fun, but one thing that Conor does is he wants that. He works on it. Conor would never show up to a press conference not ready to go. And when I'm around Conor and it's private, I mean, this might really surprise you, but I would put his personality as far as I would call him shy. He does not say much. He will sit there. He will listen. He's a tremendous listener. He's interested in him. He's a really polite guy. If somebody pulls out so much as an iPhone and turns it on, he's on. It's a different deal. The sunglasses come on, the face goes straight, the lines start coming, and he's a professional. All the guys want to be able to do that, but then they get to a press conference and they listen to what's asked. And I always encourage guys, don't answer questions, handle questions. Whatever comes out of somebody else's mouth, you take it in whatever direction that you want to go. But most guys will go to a press conference. I mean, I've seen people fly into press conferences from across the world, sit down at them, and when they get asked the one question that somebody in the crowd, in the media, just felt bad for them and asked them, they didn't even want to know, just realized they were the kid that got picked last in kickball. They will say, I'm not here to talk, I'm here to fight. And they'll put the microphone down. It's like, well, no, that's not true. There is no fight here. You are only here to talk. And to speak about McGregor, but a big lesson, when McGregor took on Floyd Mayweather, they sold out 4 arenas for the press tour. They sold out one in Los Angeles at 2:00 on a sunny day. No chance that a punch would be thrown. So you are there to talk. You are definitely there to talk. You were there to entertain. You're there to evoke an emotion. And McGregor and Floyd sold out 4 arenas. The night they fought, contrary to the way it's reported, it did not sell out. I was there. It was far from a sellout. But they sold out 4 press conferences. There's a lesson in that.
I feel like you've changed the whole, I think the self-promotion after fights has never been better. And, you know, you talk about it on your YouTube channel a lot. You tell guys, hey, be pitching your next fight. So I think you had a massive, massive influence on fighters. And the thing I think, again, as an entrepreneur, the biggest missing link in a lot of fighters' minds is they don't get that it's not your ranking. It's, you know, how many tickets can you sell? And if you're good enough to sell millions of tickets or pay-per-views, then you'll get a piece of that. And if you don't, well, you know, then you're just another guy on the card that is going to fill the arena. So I think a lot of fighters don't get that, but I think you're helping them get it.
I appreciate that. There are some sports that are contested that way. If you take rodeo, by example, my father was a cowboy. But when rodeo gives the world championship out each year, a lot of people don't understand this because they hold this big event at UNLV and it's the only rodeo that's on TV. It has nothing to do with how you did at that event. The world champion in rodeo every 12 months is whoever made the most money. They will total up your prize money. And if you made more than the next guy, it doesn't matter if you can cowboy better than him or not. If you made more money, you're the world champion that year. But I think that's what you're speaking to, right? I mean, if you can draw and you can sell tickets, that's far more important than having a good left hand or a big uppercut. You got to have people that want to come along. I know some great fighters, but I mean, really great fighters that not only can't make it up the card within the Ultimate Fighting Championship, but they can't even get signed. And it's just because they're not interesting enough. And I've even heard athletes complain to Dana White, you don't promote me enough. You don't like me. And I'll always want to stop them right there and go, hold on. Tell me what that word means. What do you mean he doesn't promote you? Because all a good promoter is a good storyteller. And all a big fight is one that has a really good story behind it. So it's kind of up to the athlete. It's a major opportunity. I mean, they're 1099 contractors, but they need to look at it like that. They need to look at it as a brand in the world of social media and of things that you can do on your own to bring attention and tell your own story. All a good promoted athlete is someone with a good story. And if that's not you, if you don't have it, go out and create a character. Floyd Mayweather is not running around Money Mayweather throwing money and wearing Rolexes. He's not if you see him in Vegas. He is when the cameras are on. It's a character that's far more interesting than true Floyd. So he developed it.
Love to talk about your training, your dieting during the fighting. I mean, again, very few human beings have reached the level of competition that you did. I mean, you're the pinnacle of UFC, and it's when, to me, it's probably do you agree, before I ask that question, do you think UFCs are the greatest athletes in the world?
I think that they're up there, yeah. And I think that's a little bit new. I mean, I was a fan back in 1993 when they were just throwing guys. It was a cage fight, and they were marketing it from a more barbaric standpoint. But then you started to get real athletes. Randy Couture comes to mind, one of my mentors. But Randy Couture was a world-class wrestler. No Olympian had ever done it yet. Nobody that, from the top boxing ranks. And Randy started to bring other athletes in that were Olympians, that were Olympic medalists, that were NCAA greats. And really start to train appropriately. One thing that Randy did and that Randy brought to the sport, Randy went to the highest of levels, more world championships than I can count. Did it at light heavyweight, did it at heavyweight. I mean, he had such a beautiful career. But the one thing that was different about Randy, and I saw him every day on a training basis, is he took it like a professional sport. He paid attention to nutrition. He cared how many hours of sleep he was getting. He worked extremely hard in the gym, but he put a real concentration on rest, on recovery, on a day off, and what he was going to do, whether it was ice baths or massage, but things like this to prepare him to go back out there. He was a world-class athlete, and he was the first one that looked at MMA as a true sport in and of itself. And I think it's one of the reasons he went as high as he did, as quick as he did.
Yeah, I think GSP followed that model as well.
Sure.
I mean,
great example.
So yeah, back to you, your training. We'd love to maybe have you walk us through what a typical day of training was at the peak, from morning to night, nutrition, because again, to operate at the level you did, it's superhuman. Very few people ever get to that.
Well, that's a tremendous compliment, and I will never return to it. If there's anything that I miss, it's not just walking in the arena or having a purpose or being in the spotlight. It is that preparation. And I firmly believe, at least within my own life, I can't have any happiness without struggle. Something had to. I had a fortune cookie when I was a kid that I still remember. It was 11 years old, and it said, "Rest is only appreciated when it's earned." And I didn't know what that meant at 11 years old, but as I become an adult, I most certainly do. I cannot enjoy a day off. I could not enjoy a vacation with my wife unless we earned it, unless we worked hard and sacrificed to get out of town for a couple of days. So I only bring that to you because I would wake up depressed. It was so difficult what I would have to do I would wake up in the morning. Oh my God, I got 3 practices in front of me, all with my coach, Clayton Hires, who was a military sergeant in the Army. He ran it like a military sergeant. When I started to get older, 35 and 36 years old, things got a little harder, and he was still training me like I was a 14-year-old kid. And I was having a hard time getting through those workouts, and we would do 3 a day. And in hindsight, I think we probably trained a little too hard, but it was an old school mentality. And we wanted to have confidence when we left the locker room to walk to the ring, that we did everything we could do to win. And you will ask yourself that question in the back, right before your music hits those speakers. You will ask yourself, do I deserve to win? And there are times that answer is no, and you know it. And it's not a good feeling. So, I mean, I truly would wake up, and it was the first thing I would think every morning is, oh my gosh, what I have to do before I will be back in this bed tonight. And it was tough, man. It was 3 sessions a day, 2 hours apiece. You're crawling out of there, if not vomiting in one of the sessions. I mean, it was absolutely everything you had. And I do think, looking back, I might have ground myself down a little bit. I think maybe I could have done a little bit less.
So it was 3 workouts. You would do what? Striking, grappling, conditioning.
Yep. That's precisely it. And we would do one on Sunday. It's the hardest workout I've ever done. I had to do it every Sunday. It was just called The Hill, but it was a 2.5-mile hill up. And it was a real gradual climb. You started at the bottom and you get up and you got the greatest view in all of Portland, but it was still 2.5 miles. Every single step you were gaining elevation. And I had to have that done in less than 20 minutes. And that didn't happen very often. It did towards the end of camp. I could get up there in about 18 minutes, but I couldn't get that under 20. And I would try every time. Then we go partway down. We had to run stairs. We get all the way to the bottom. Then we had to run sprints on the track. It was 1 hour exactly, but we warmed up with 3 or 4 rounds on the mitts. I mean, I was exhausted before I took my first step. I had to do that every Sunday at 6 a.m. I hated that hill.
So on the nutrition side, were you following any philosophy or just trying to get as many calories as you could?
Trying to get as many, and it was such a struggle. I was cannibalizing my body. I was weighing about 220 pounds. I was competing at 185 pounds. So the hardest part was making, for sure, the hardest opponent consistently was making weight. I got a call one time for a short notice fight. I was 36.2 pounds over. I had to make weight in exactly 21 days. That was the single hardest physical exercise that I've ever had to go through. Dana White gave me for making weight. He read what I had to go through. He gave me $10,000, but he didn't give it to me till after I made it. And I really could have used that motivation. Like if he would have told me you were going to get $10,000 is a ton of money, but $10,000 when you're not owed it is much more exciting experiment. And yeah, that was a difficult one. I had one for an Anderson Silva fight. 22 pounds over, 17 hours before weigh-ins. And that was a very trying one too. But I had learned later in my career, like I grew up as a wrestler, which is one of the very few things in life that you have to make weight to be able to do. If any other boss anywhere tried to make somebody get on a scale before they let them go to work, they would be sued instantly. But for some reason in the sport of fighting, you have to do it contractually. So I only bring that to you because very unique. And you'll hear doctors talk about dehydration all the time. It's very rare to meet somebody that's actually dehydrated. To explain to you how mentally tough you have to be to get dehydrated, to actually pull water out of your system, there's very few jobs that require that. So I did know a lot about it. And very early on, meaning my whole life, all the way through the NCAA ranks, I would just not eat. And that's the same thing my teammates would do. We would just stop eating. And once I learned more about nutrition, there was a lot easier way. There was a lot of calories I could start to consume that were of whole foods. Drinking 1 gallon to 2 gallons a day really helped with my body. It just helped to flush it out. As I tell you, I had to lose 22 pounds in 17 hours, but I was drinking 2 gallons a day. I mean, that alone is 16 pounds of water, that depending on what part of flushing it through. So I could really give up sweat quickly. And once I started to learn that later in life, I started to understand nutrition. I understand when to eat, what to eat. Life was a lot better.
Was that the event where you just slammed down a Coke on stage?
Yes. Did
you get paid for that?
I did not. I've told people I did. I've told people that I was sponsored by Coke. That's a stone cold lie. But a Coca-Cola tastes so good when you are 17 pounds and ice cold Coca-Cola is proof of God and heaven above.
No, that was one of my favorite.
To explain it.
That was one of my favorite weigh-in moments. Just the way you crushed that can was it was epic. It was awesome.
You know, I don't know if Dana's ever spoke to me on that stage when you're weighing in. It's like, yeah, get out of the way for the next guy. And he goes, a Coke? That was all that he said. And I was like, I go, Dana, it tastes so good. And he's like, I bet it does. And that was it. But I do remember that moment. And then I told people that I was sponsored. I wasn't. I just wanted the Coke.
It was a great moment. Go ahead, Wade.
No, I can relate to some of the dehydration.
My sponsorship with Coca-Cola back then is the same it is today, which is I take a Coke up to the counter. I then pay the woman for it and it's mine. Just like that. No questions asked.
Okay, yeah, I can relate to the dehydration. I used to do bodybuilding and I'd have to dehydrate to make classes. But I think the weight cutting, we didn't have to fight anybody. So, you know, I couldn't fight a bowl of spaghetti at that point. So the fact that you get in the ring with another killer kind of blows my mind. I think one of the things that I'm curious about, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't understand. And I was able to do it, and you've been able to do it. And that was, I took my bodybuilding career, which was not nearly as illustrious as your MMA career, but I was able to translate it into a professional career beyond. At what point did you start thinking about how you could take what you achieved in the ring and take it out to a bigger market? And you've been one of the guys that have made MMA popular. Like, you can take credit for that. Like, I listened to your podcast. I listened to your insights. I want to know more about the game because of, number one, your experience of being a competitor. But what point did you make that jump, and how has that been for you, for maybe to lay down what that trajectory be like for athletes today in various sports that might not be the prototypical gold medal athletes or pro, but turn out to have maybe a longer and better career because of what they can do after their athletic career?
Well, first, I have to tell you, you're a bodybuilder. I wish I would have met you many years ago. Wrestlers, I wrestled all through the Division I ranks, but we got credited as the experts in cutting weight. That's what we thought. Now, we only got credited for that because we did it, so people assumed we knew. We used to put on those plastic suits and get in the sauna and just starve ourselves. We would do all of these things. It was a bodybuilder. A bodybuilder named Mike Dolce came over to MMA, and he changed everything. You guys had the secrets. When I talk about the gallon or the 2 gallons, that water load, we didn't know anything about that. That's a bodybuilding trick. And we learned another one, which is the salt bath, the Epsom salts. We didn't know that. That all came from the world of bodybuilding. So when we met Mike Dolce, understanding why you have asparagus and chicken, by example, even if you're not hungry, you take a few bites. We didn't know any of these things. It was you guys. You guys were the experts, but we didn't know that you went through that. Mike Dolce changed all of MMA. I mean, he started getting in people's corners. Dana White made a TV show with him. He started writing books, but all the tricks that we learned were from bodybuilding. So I got to give you that credit. You guys were way ahead of us, and now we're stealing your ideas, and they really do work. And secondly, it's very hard to participate in this sport, and I love this sport, but it's very hard to participate unless you're throwing punches and getting punched at. It's just one of those things. To be a commentator, it's hard. And that was really my drive. I saw how things ended for other guys, which is you've got all this attention, you've got all this focus, and it all goes away one day. Mm-hmm. And I will tell anyone that will listen, you were never done with this sport, but you will wake up one day and this sport is done with you. And it really is true. And I got to see that my first time just after college. 22 years old, young people, but guys that were real stars of our team, boom, their eligibility's out. And life was really tricky for a couple of years for them. They filled some of those voids with alcohol and some other stuff. There was some depressions, and I was just able to see that I don't want to do that in the pros. I got to have something else I can transition to, a little bit of a softer landing for the day when I find out I can't do this anymore. And that was really my motivation. I don't know if I was an expert at it, but I worked really hard. I worked really hard at getting out there and talking about it or building it up or promoting it just so I had something else to do. A lot of it was a self-preservation mechanism. I didn't want to wake up one day and not have any way to participate. And I was scared of it. And so, that's kind of what the genesis for transitioning to some of the speaking was.
So what was was that a gradual integration? Did you get a break? Did you earn yourself? Like, how did that go? How did that move? And now you're a brand. I mean, okay. You've completely turned the tables from, an athlete to where you are today as one of the strong voices in the industry. So what was that journey like?
You guys are really I got to hang out with you guys more often. You know how to make someone feel good. Thank you for saying that. Here's what happened. I had a fight coming up with a guy named Anderson Silva. Now, at the time that fight was signed, it was just a fight. By the time it came around, it was a world event. It was a really big deal, but we had the help of the media at the time that it was signed. I wasn't positive that Anderson Silva knew what a Chael Sonnen was. I'm not positive when he signed the contract to fight me. I'm not sure. I knew who he was. I mean, I looked up to this guy in all fairness. I watched him on pay-per-view and doing all the stuff I wanted to do. So I leave. I'm at Mandalay Bay. And they have a convention center, and then there's it's like a 1/4-mile walk indoor, but to get back to where the rooms and the casino and the elevator so you could get upstairs to the room. So I'm walking out and I am a hit. I mean, I got 3 and 4 people asking me for autographs. They're asking me for selfies, which was like right when the selfie was coming. I've never been more famous in my whole life. These 3 or 4 people all turn and join a mob of people who were circling somebody. And it was like Brad Pitt walked out. I mean, this guy had hundreds of people around him, and including the 4 people that were there they all left. So who is this guy? So I'm walking over and I'm trying to look. It's Anderson Silva. So Anderson, unlike me, I was so gracious. These 4 people were there. I'd never had anybody want a picture with me. He's telling people no. No, I gotta go. And he's walking down this hallway. So I yelled to him. I've never come in contact with him at all. Our media had never began. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. And I yelled, but the contract was signed. We were going to fight. And I yelled to him in front of all those people. You better sign those autographs, Anderson, because when I'm done with you, nobody's going to want your autograph again. Now that came because my feelings were hurt. I was hurt that the 4 people for me left to join the mob for him. But at any rate, we're walking down this hallway and he's yelling to me. He's trying to catch up to me. So he walks up to me, but there's people everywhere with phones. And I know whatever happens right now is how this fight's going to be marketed. So I got to go into character. So he throws an arm around me, which is the most condescending thing you can possibly do to a guy, right? That's like what your big brother does. He puts an arm around you. So he's got his arm. So I turn and I shove him and people are filming it. It's a real thing. And he says, hey, you got to calm down. You're new at this. You've got to calm down. Be professional. Whatever he said to me. I leave. I walk away. And I'm smelling this part of my shirt where his armpit was on me. And it smells fantastic. Like whatever deodorant he had was some kind of like this tropical. It was something that I never smelled before. And it smelled so good. So I get to the Mandalay Bay and there's an open bar. I promise this story has a point, but I get to an open bar. And I go up to I'm craving a Roy Rogers, which is a Coca-Cola with a shot of grenadine, like a 5-year-old would have. So I go get this and I make conversation with some guy. And I can tell when I'm talking to him that he knows who I am. I can tell he's a fight fan. So I think I'm just making conversation with the fan. I tell him what just happened and I tell him to smell my shirt. I said, smell this. So I tell him that's Anderson Silva's deodorant. The guy looks at me and says, can you tell that story again next week on ESPN? I said, yeah. He pulls out a card. He's a vice president of ESPN. And that story broke me into the business. You asked me if I had a story. That's how I broke into the business. I've been with the Walt Disney Company ever since.
I got one more question and then I'll queue up Matt for some because I know he's chomping at the bit, but the art of storytelling. Now, there's some things that I think that I pick up. Number one, you tell great stories. You tell a story very much like a comic. There's pacing, there's a punchiness to it, and and there's also you do contradictions within it. Almost all your openings, and Matt and I, a little side point for all our listeners. I do this. I do a Chael, like I do this, like, hey Matt, I got this crazy question. It's driving me mad. You know, like if we do this kind of stuff, because now I'm parroting Chael Sonnen, right? Was that something that you had innately? Are you from a family of storytellers? Was it something that you cultivated? Was it a skill set? Did you learn it? Did you study it? Or is it a combination of all of those things? Because I'm from a family of storytellers, but I got into the art of storytelling, right? It's fun, it's great, and it's exciting, and you're one of the best at it. How did you cultivate that skill? Because that's a skill today that is probably as valuable as anything there is in the media world.
The biOptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes, as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
Communication, right? I agree with you. And for sure, I ripped somebody else off. Now, I was probably influenced by 4 or 5 people. I couldn't tell you who it was specifically that I tried to work myself around, but for sure, and I'll still do that today. I'll watch comedians on stage, or I'll watch politicians and those debate, and I'll steal stuff. I'll go, I see what he did there. I see what he did. I just picked one up. It was Conor McGregor, but Conor McGregor was just in a jam for getting caught snorting blow and punching some old man in the face. I mean, this was real. It wasn't good. And they interviewed Conor, and he said, you're showing your face when you know you're wrong, and that first interview is going to come at you is a hard thing to do. He sat there with good body language, and as Ariel Helwani asked him these very tough questions, Conor was just mumbling under his breath, and he would simply say, as though he was pondering Ariel's question, as though he had no idea this question. So, Conor, you were recently on TMZ for doing illegal drugs and punching an old man, and Conor's sitting there going, And it was just a small thing, but I picked up on it. I remember studying, going, that's it. That's how Conor's going to deal with this. That's how he's going to deal with this humiliating interview, as though he's caught off guard, that the question's coming up, as though this wasn't all over the tabloids for the last 2 months. It was small and it was subtle, but I stole it. I'll take that with me, and I'll bring up the somewhere down the line. And I imagine I just did that my whole life from different storytellers, but thank you for noticing.
You're one of the GOATs. I got to ask, because to me, it's one of my most memorable fights I've ever seen, which was Silva Sonnen 1. Beginning of the 5th round, what was going on in your mind? Was it I've got it in the bag, or were you I'm still in the fight here?
No, so I had no idea I had dominated him that way. The numbers of that fight came out afterwards. I hit him 308 times. He hit me 11. That was the most lopsided title fight in all time. Now, I don't say that to shine my own wheels. Fellas, I had no idea. I came out of the ring that night, and the first person I saw was Joe Silva, the vice president and the matchmaker. And he stood up and he met me at the cage door with a handshake. And I said, Joe, I'm sorry. And what I was saying sorry for is Joe Silva and Dana White won an exciting fight, particularly their main event. And nothing happened in this match. I barely did anything. He barely did anything. The crowd was put to sleep. That's how I felt. And Joe gave me a very weird look. He didn't respond at all. He didn't say that's okay. He looked at me confused, shook my hand, and I left. A guy comes into the back, and they do something called Fight of the Night bonus, which is very exciting. It's free money. Guy comes in the back and says, Lorenzo and Dana want you to have this. You got Fight of the Night. And I remember when they handed it to me thinking, they feel bad for me. I lost. They feel bad for me. That fight not only was Fight of the Night, it went on and won something called Fight of the Year. We got recognized at the World MMA Awards. It was Fight. I had no idea anybody liked that fight. I had no idea I was that busy, or I'd done this many things to him. I had no idea. I knocked him down twice. I had 2 10-8 rests, but I didn't know it. I was so lost in exhaustion. And when you asked me specifically about the 5th round, I had never been in a 5-round fight. And I got confused somewhere within the fight. And I said to my corner, Matt Gallant, what round is this? And Matt says it's the 4th. Now, that is very meaningful, because at some point, I don't have to beat Anderson. I just got to beat the clock. All I have to do is run out the clock, and this thing is over. I thought there was 10 minutes left. I didn't realize we were in the very last stanza. And I don't say there's any kind of excuse. I say that to illustrate how tired I was. I was so exhausted, and I had such an urgency. I was so truly scared of him that I had an urgency with everything. I've never moved so fast. I never took somebody down so many times, but I did it because I was so scared to be on my feet with him. And it's one thing that after that first fight that I lost. We matched up a second time, and it wasn't nearly the same match. And it was because I lost that urgency. I lost that fear. I lost all of that anxiety that I had. It had kind of gone away because the mask was off and I'd been in there with him. And I regret that. I resent it about myself. I wish that I would have been more scared. I wish I would have understood this was a once in a lifetime opportunity. I wish I would have really understood the gravity of it the second time, but I did. I look back now, I'd love to be in that spot, have 2 months and go prepare for him. But, you know, that's life. It's over. And I don't get that.
How did you feel once he got the submission?
When he got the submission, it was definitely legit. Like some people were saying that I didn't tap or the referee stopped it. I for sure tapped. And the referee said something to me like, hey, you tapped, or I thought you tapped. He said something. And I remember looking at him and I simply said, I believe you. That was it. Nothing else was said. Now, a commissioner came out and tried to say I was arguing it and I was arguing with the referee. That absolutely did not happen. And that official will back me up. I understood what happened and it was fair play. You tap, I mean, it was the right call. But I still remember vaguely, but how fatigued I was. Just the 5-round club is a very rare club. Usually you don't even get signed for a 5 round. You could do the sport 20 years, but if you don't make it to a title fight, you don't have 5 rounds. And then to go all 5 rounds, it's very rare. You'd be stunned how few of fighters have actually joined the 5-round club. And I was a minute away from it. I'm throwing myself in there, but there was a level of exhaustion. The way that you prepare and the way that you manage energy from a strategic standpoint is very different. And I'd never done it before. I'd only done it in practice. So looking back, I didn't need 311 punches to 8 punches. I could have pulled things back. I could have controlled more, but I didn't know that at the time. I was scared. There was pure chaos. And then people ended up liking it after the fact. I didn't know that. That fight kind of I lost that fight. And that I kind of have, wherever I am today, I kind of owe even to that loss. That was my question. Did you feel like that night, that even though you had lost, that you had won, or that took a while to realize? No, it took, months and months and months. I went somewhere and I remember being with Pat Barry and some other fighters that I looked up to. We pulled up and there was people surrounding the car and I just assumed it was for them. And I was like, well, guys, good luck with this. And Pat looked at me and goes, Chael, they're here for you. And I remember I laughed when he said it. And I didn't even know at that moment it was right until we got out of the car and I didn't know how people looked at that fight. When I told Joe Silva, sorry, that wasn't me looking for, oh, shucks, you did a good job. I thought it was a boring match. I didn't realize what had happened. I didn't realize it was all these strikes I just didn't get it. I didn't know what round I didn't know there was a minute left in the fight, which does make it extra dramatic. I thought there was 2 rounds left in the fight. So at that night, no, I didn't know. I went in the back. I was bawling in tears. I was inconsolable by my mother. I didn't know that was one that was actually going to elevate me. I'd never heard of a loss elevating somebody. That one for me, it did.
Well, as a fight fan, it was just shocking to see anybody dominate Silva.
Yeah.
That was the shocking part of the fight. That's what made it so engaging. Go ahead, Wade.
Yeah, that's the fight that brought me into the MMA. I went to see it because I didn't actually know Chael, and I was like, oh, we're kind of hearing about Silva. We've seen a little bit of stuff, and then you come in and basically kicked his ass for the entire fight. And I was like, oh, this Silva guy is not that impressive, Chael just dominated. 2 questions though, because it's related, kind of going back to the career trajectory, which I think is interesting. First off, I'm a big fan of George Foreman, and George Foreman talks about when he went into the ring against Joe Frazier in Madison Square Gardens, and he was worried that people were going to see his knees knocking together because he was so scared before he knocked Frazier out of the ring in 2 rounds. And he talked about the fear factor. So let me go there, and I'll lead up the next question after. What's it like? Because I think to get into a cage, like I walked over to the cage over here in Los Angeles. It's, I got into the cage. I'm not a UFC fighter. I'm not formally trained and all that sort of stuff. I got in the cage and I go in here and I'm going, this is a terrifying, just getting in this cage is terrifying. I can't imagine an absolute killer that wants to rip my head off and end my life is going to get in here. How do you prepare yourself psychologically for the fear? Is it a factor for you? Are you able to come over it? And do you have any advice for people who are experiencing fear, but are able to go through it anyway?
Sure. So I spent my whole life trying to get rid of that fear. And I made it a really long way. I mean, I couldn't sleep the night before and things like that, or I'd throw up in the back just because I was so nervous. I got over all of that kind of stuff. And I could even have conversations in the back and then warm up and be a little bit more matter of fact. I came a really long way. But as I look back, my best moments were because of that fear. In my wrestling career, my jiu-jitsu career, my MMA career, when I lost that fear, when I lost that edge, I felt my competition go down. I mean, I felt the way that I competed, even if I was getting my hand raised, it wasn't the performance that I wanted. It wasn't as good as when I had all of those senses at a height. Now, you do have to overcome them and you got to make that walk anyway. But you talk about going in the cage. I fought a guy on the regional scene named Terry Martin. At that point in my life, that was the toughest guy I had ever fought. And we were in Illinois, in Chicago. I walk out there. I'm in the cage and I'm the first one there. This is his hometown. I get brought. So anyway, small arena, but it was full. And I remember watching Terry Martin come into the ring and I'm looking around. I don't know anybody here. I'm not getting paid for, it's like $500 for the whole thing. It's not on TV. My ego's not at stake. And I don't have a problem with this guy. I don't even know him. And I remember standing there thinking, why are we here? Why am I standing in this cage in Chicago, Illinois on a Saturday night? I don't know anybody. Like, it doesn't matter if I beat him or not. It was one of these things, but that's not a good thought to have. Like, when you're getting in that moment and you got your game face on and you're ready to go, and I'm trying to intimidate him and he's scaring the holy hell out of me. It's not good. And so I really did have to go back and kind of analyze that. Hey, why are we here? What is the reason? And the reason can be anything, but I need to have one. And I only had that feeling one other time. It was one of my last fights. I fought a guy named Rampage Jackson, but we fought at heavyweight. I was a middleweight. So I skip over light heavy. All of a sudden I'm in there with heavyweight and he barely made the heavyweight limit. The limit was 265. He was 263. And I remember being in the cage and he came in second and he had to turn as he came through the door. Like, he had to turn just a little bit to fit through the door, took his chain off. You know, Rampage, he's a very intimidating guy. He howls on the way to the ring. It's this whole thing. And I remember he was coming through and I had that same feeling that I had in Chicago all those years earlier in more of a regional show. I remember thinking, why am I here? Like, why did I agree to this? I don't need to fight at heavyweight. I don't need to be fighting Rampage. I remember thinking that and go, no, you learned this lesson once before. You're here. Make it work this time. But the psychological piece never goes away. I've tried to conquer that my whole life. And now that I look back, I don't know how advantageous that is. If it freezes you and stops you, that's a different thing. But I work with kids now. I'm a high school wrestling coach. And I want them to have that. I can see that look in their eye. I can see that fear and that anxiety until they get their hands on the guy and the whistle's blowing and a little bit of a sweat gets going. I think they need it and I think it's helpful. So there's a fine line there on how much of that do you want to overcome and how much of that do you need to be competitive?
Very powerful information. Was there any things that you used to do or that you coach now for people today to kind of manage the paralyzing aspect of fear to the performance activating side of fear?
Yes. And the number one thing is what you and I are doing right now. We talk about it. If you admit I'm scared, you took a lot of power away from that fear. If you admit I'm nervous, I'm not sure I want to be here, you take a lot of power away from that emotion. And Randy Couture is big, to bring his name up again, but he's very influential on me. And he was very big into the idea that excitement and fear chemically in your brain is the same chemical. You get to decide, is this scary to me or is this exciting? Now, I've never fully, don't know if I agree that he's right, but he believed it. He really, and every time he would get scared, he would then convince himself, no, that's excitement. And it worked for him. And I've been in the back with him. I've been on cards with him where I was a co-main event and he was a main. I mean, I will see how he's warming up minutes before he's got to walk out there in front of the world as the marquee guy. And he is very calm. He can really compartmentalize things. Whether it's the weigh-in day, oh, great, that's what we do today. Whether it's, okay, now it's time to warm up. It's time to put my cup and my mouthpiece in. It's time to walk to the cage. And then that was his switch. You get to the cage and they put Vaseline on you. That's when he would flip the switch. The whole rest of the time, he was enjoying the moment. He was enjoying his music. He was enjoying the crowd. Once they put the Vaseline on and he turned, that's when he did that switch. I had a point in my career, if I may tell you guys, where I went on a run. I think I won 8 fights in a row, but I became the #1 contender. Up until then, I had lost X amount of fights. I believe it was 5. But I had lost them all by submission in the second round, and I was dominating the fight. And I looked at that on a sheet somewhere. it came to my attention. I never realized second round submission, and I'm the one winning the fight. So I went in and met with a doctor. He does hypnosis. And I told him that. I said, this is too much of a coincidence. I know submissions. I don't get submitted in practice ever. I know how to stop these submissions, but there's something about the second round that's giving me problems. And I went under hypnosis. And I think that sounds a little funny, even as I say it, but it was when I came out of that I went on my run and I was able to get through that second round. I won the first round of every fight I've ever had. The second round was my problem. If I could get to the third round, no problem. There was something about that middle ground. And I went and got professional help. I talked about it just like we're talking. Here's what's happening to me. The doctor called it taking inventory. Okay, you start to assess yourself. I got a black eye and I'm only halfway through. How am I going to feel, in another 8 minutes? And you find a way out. You find a way to get out of that situation. And if I could just work through the second round, I could win the fights. And that's still the story of my career. I dealt with that every single night. But if I could get through that second round, I could close out the evening.
I agree 100%. And again, I've programmed my mind that when I feel that combination of excitement and fear that I'm doing the right thing. And I think, when you're challenging yourself, it's just the natural feeling. And the GSP was probably the most public guy in interviews to acknowledge that he was scared of every single fight. And what was interesting about GSP, which made him so likable and humble, of course, he's a fellow Canadian, is that he would talk about it prior to the fight sometimes, and I think a lot of fighters didn't do that. So there was some humility there and probably helped him manage it. I want to go back to
because you said George is the greatest of all time. People love to have that conversation. The conversation's silly. The answer is George St. Pierre, but you were right. George would talk, but George took all the power of fear away by admitting it. And George worked with a guy named Brian Cain, and George turned me onto him. And Brian Cain was very big into the idea that actions are real, emotions are fake. So many times we're led to believe it's emotions and it's internal and you can overcome anything. And the guy's going, but what sport is that true? What touchdown is based on, or what basket is based on how you felt inside, whether you were confident or your parents loved you more or not? You have to physically get the ball into the designated area to get the points. And he makes a very fair point. And he convinced George St. Pierre to act because actions are real and emotions are fake. This is the number one contention of this specific sports psychologist. To act however it is you want to feel. If you want to feel confident, just act it. If you want to act scared, act it. If you want to act brave, act it. He assured you your opponent's doing the same thing. Anytime you look across the ring, you go, God, I wish I was like that guy. That guy wants to be. He's acting. And Mike Tyson, who's maybe the most ferocious and feared athlete of my lifetime, is very open about that post-career. He was scared to death. He would throw up in the back. He would punch lockers. He would try to get anxiety out because he was so scared. There is definitely a place for fear in sport that's positive. Contrary to what athletes think, it's positive.
I want to go back to the weight cutting and actually talk about Usada. One of the changes for the people that don't know, Usada is considered one of the best drug testing organizations in the world. And one of the things they did is they took out the IVs as an example. But anyways, we can talk about that another time. My question to you is, what percentage of UFC fighters and athletes in general do you think are on PEDs today?
I think there's a very good, when Usada first came in, I mean, it was as simple as an eye test. You had these athletes that were the incredible shrinking man overnight. You had champions who are now competing in different weight classes and they're smaller. And we know as human beings, we don't get smaller with time. So Usada was real and it was very effective at what it did. Now the bodies have changed back. The guys are back to their weight classes. They're going a little harder. Their veins are popping out a little more. It's very clear that guys are finding ways around Usada. But Usada's biggest knock, and I think that they're a very good organization in all fairness, their biggest knock was that IV ban, because that was a clue. Nobody knew how to beat Usada. Usada's the one that taught us. If you put the chemicals in IV and you flush it with a bag, it's going to be through and we're not going to be able to catch you. Nobody knew that. Nobody knew that until Usada came out and banned it. It was the biggest mistake that they've done. First off, an IV is not a substance. They're supposed to be a substance organization. It's a form of administration, which you really shouldn't be. I mean, that's weird that anybody allowed that to be banned, that you couldn't go listen to your doctors. We had guys outside of training and competition, didn't even have fights coming up, who got rushed to the ER. This happened to BJ Penn, a name that you would know. He gets rushed to the ER. If you go to the ER, the absolute first thing they will do, no matter what you were there, you can have a leg cut off, whatever it is, they will put an IV in your arm instantly. They put a name tag around your wrist and they put an IV in your arm. So BJ had this done to him. He then admitted it to Usada, and they go, well, how many did you have? How many CCs did you have? And it was over 30, which is against their rule. And they flagged him. BJ Penn, who did not do an illegal substance and didn't even know that was against the rules, got flagged. But that's when people started to learn, oh, there's something with this IV business. There's something that Usada knows. And Usada's the one that taught people how to cheat. So when you ask me how many percentage of guys, I mean, it's a very high percentage. It's the top guys of the card. It's the guys that have some money in their pocket, same as it always was. But Usada's the one that taught them, you can flush this out if you do an IV and we can't catch you.
Did you ever try a rectal water load? Is that possible? Hang upside down?
I never did. I mean, I've heard some weird stuff. I've actually never heard of that one, but I know guys that did that before they got on a scale that would stand on their head, with the science being that when the blood is all rushing down, it'll throw a digital scale and make it. I don't know if that's ever worked, but I know guys that have done it. I've seen them in the back standing on their head before they walk through the curtain like fools.
Do you think that sports should just embrace PEDs and see what human evolution at its pinnacle could look like?
No, I don't think that I do. I don't think that I do because, you know, sports really isn't for the professionals. It's really for the amateurs, in all fairness. So when you have something like the NCAA where scholarships are fought over, or even the Olympics, which is a very coveted organization, when you have guys that are cheating and they're to a superhuman level, it's no longer about who worked hard or who sacrificed. It's none of the stuff that we try to teach kids. It's none of those messages. But I do think that Usada has gone way too far. There was an Olympic all-around champion. The gymnast was 14 years old from China in 2008. She tested positive for a billionth of a trace of ibuprofen that has a street name of Advil. She did not have the foggiest idea that Advil was banned. None of us knew it was banned. As a matter of fact, NBC, who had the rights to this, filmed her trainer take out of a fanny pack and hand it to her. He didn't know it was, nobody knew. They gave the silver medal to her fellow countrywoman who accepted it in tears, didn't want anything to do with it. They banned that little girl from Olympic competition for life. Security came in and removed her trainer from Olympic Village for life. I think that that's silly. I don't think that it should be performance enhancing. Performance enhancing are positive terms. I've never taken anything in my life unless I thought it would enhance my performance. I had to go before a commission one day and they said, have you ever taken a performance enhancing? And I'm under oath. I said, guys, I've never taken anything. I've never tasted alcohol. I've never smoked a cigarette. I've never done anything in my life unless I thought it would enhance my performance. Of course I've taken, it was the silliest question I've ever been asked. They thought my answer was silly, but I disagree with that. If you want to be medicine that can make it to the shelves and get FDA approval, which is overseen by the United States Senate, the first thing you have to do is prove you can help somebody. I would never go to a doctor and say, I'm feeling great, doc. Do you have anything that could bring me down a little bit? And if he said yes, that's malpractice. It has to enhance your performance. I have no idea how those are the words, how those are the terms that we're going by. You have illegal anabolics, you have cheating, and then you have good, solid medicine. And to combine those two, or to take a little girl's Olympic gold medal away for ibuprofen, come on, man, that's ridiculous.
I'm going to counter and say that I'm going to quote my friend AJ Roberts, who was the world's strongest man for a short period of time. His total powerlifting was 3,000. And powerlifting, I mean, they embrace it all, the suit, the whatever, in order to maximize. And it's just like, if you're trying to create the fastest car in the world, I mean, yeah, you're creating advanced technologies that advance. The only thing, of course, with MMA is, of course, the risk of death, which is a big issue. And of course, if you kill someone, which I think is why the UFC made those legal decisions to change and go with Usada. That's my theory, is that they were worried about a massive potential lawsuit and they wanted to de-risk that. So, but I think it would, in other sports, I think it's inevitable, you know, genetic engineering and other ways with, you know, biohacking. I mean, if you think about fairness, is there genetics that are exactly the same? That is the ultimate unfair advantage. So can athletes use other things to compensate? Anyways, that's just my perspective. I know we just got a few minutes left, but Wade, any other final questions for Uncle Chael?
Yeah, I would like to kind of turn it over to where do you see Bad Guy Inc., MMA, and Chael's career moving now that you've become a brand of yourself? You're doing a great job out there. How do you see that expanding over the coming decades?
I think that I'm on the right track. I mean, I produce 5 shows a day, and they're for YouTube. They're 7 and 8 minutes long, but I produce 5 a day. It doesn't matter if it's Sunday. It doesn't matter if it's Christmas Day. I'm putting out 5 shows, a couple podcasts a week, have a good participation with ESPN. So I think I'm just going to stay on that trajectory. It's hard to do. I have to travel a lot. I used to look at travel as an opportunity. Now I look at it as a real burden, unless my wife comes with me. Otherwise, I'm just alone having dinner by myself in a hotel room. But I'll bring a cameraman wherever I am in the world. I've been in Israel and Australia and Brazil just in the last year, but I bring a cameraman. I put those 5 shows out. I'm extremely consistent. I've seen some real growth by that, but I've also seen if I let my audience down and I don't bring them those 5 shows, they notice it. So I kind of have a deal with the audience. You come to me each day and I promise that I'll have an offering for you. And I'm going to stay consistent and keep doing that.
How many hours a day do you spend reading the comments in your videos?
You know, I like those a lot. I like that community,
Awesome.
Particularly the hecklers. Like the greatest heckler, I will usually copy and paste and tweet out. I really like a clever insult. Like if you're trying to hurt my feelings, you probably will. But if you're being clever with it, I will give you credit.
Yeah, love it. I'm just going to hit you with 3 rapid fire questions. Is Conor finished as far as fighting goes?
He will fight again. His days of winning ended about 5 years ago. Yes. He will not win another fight.
Ganya versus Ngannou?
I am taking Gone. I am taking that based on inside information of teammates who saw them spar together. It was years ago, but allegedly Gone got the best of him handily. I have a hard time believing that, but I'm told that, and I'm going to go with it.
I think he's probably the most technically skilled heavyweight we've ever seen since Overeem at his peak.
There's a size difference. Francis does have a built-in. He is 265 on the dot, and Gone's about 248.
265.
Sure. So, one connection, of course, it's that day old story. And Ngannou definitely has a chance here, but I'm taking Gone. I think it'll be more technical, and I think Gone is better.
Leaning that direction too. Does Chimaev beat Usman?
Maybe. Again, inside scoop from guys in the gym, and those two have the same manager. And I'm not positive they haven't worked out somewhere along the way, but they for sure have a lot of common workout partners. And there are a lot of people that say, no, it's Usman, barely, but it's Usman. And there's a lot of people that say, no, barely, but it's Chimaev. I would be stunned. I think Usman is the pound for pound greatest in the world. I have a hard time believing Chimaev, who's only had 4 fights, can be the greatest in the world, but he might be. There's something special happening there right in front of us. But I think the rankings are right for now, and Usman is truly today's GOAT.
I know you got to go. This is my favorite interview ever. If you don't follow Chael Sonnen, he is the most entertaining man in MMA, hands down, period. End of story. Wade, back to you.
You guys are awesome, by the way.
Well, just give another one for the bad guy. Thanks for joining us today at the Awesome Health Podcast with biOptimizers. Chael Sonnen, Bad Guy Incorporated. Check out all of his podcasts. Essentially, he's the best MMA announcer out there, bar none. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, fellas.
And now for a biOptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar, live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, it's grass-fed or coconut-based, and you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the biOptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.